are all our bronze and silver people. And as you see the title here, From Inner Fires to Bright Lights, we do a talk and we frequently mention about inner fires that kind of light as a result of leading indicators. And we're going to be showing you how these inner fires internally can really blossom and bloom into external bright lights. In fact, we're going to have a couple people join us that we consider some of our brightest lights. So here's a picture of the three of us here. Linda, if you could click, please. There we go. That is obviously me, Wendy, and my dad. Now, we are all here. Wendy and I are here physically. My dad is here in spirit. But we just want you to know that we all appreciate the time that you've spent with us and the trust that you've put into the model. And hopefully we'll have something for everybody today. So let's talk a little about administration now. Wendy?
All right, just a couple of housekeeping notes for you. First is this session is being recorded for those who couldn't be with us today. So for the cleanest possible recording, all lines have been muted. If your line appears to be unmuted and you can mute it, please go ahead and mute it from your end. That's just a best practice to prevent those breakthrough noises that we hear all the time. Now, even though everyone is muted, we really want you to participate as we go. So to do that, feel free to ask us questions or make comments at any time over in that general chat area. We'll also be asking a few specific questions along the way and ask all of you to weigh in with your thoughts or your responses. So to practice that interaction, let's go ahead and do some quick introductions. So over in that general chat area, please let us know where you're coming from, your company name, and maybe just a little bit about your responsibilities or your position so everyone can see who is here. All right, we have a nice variety of participants. We've got George in Indianapolis, Greg, who's a consultant, Candace Hander is here from the FDA, Tony from TriMedics. I'm certainly not going to have time to read all 50 of them, but I see that we have people in Canada, various parts of Europe, across the United States. So we've got a nice group of people here. And just a reminder for everyone to go ahead and mute your phones so we can prevent those breakthrough sounds. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for being here with us and contributing to the presentation that will be recorded and sent out to everybody who is either working on or has earned their bronze, silver, or gold Kirkpatrick certification. So now I'm going to pass it back to Jim, and I guess Jim might like to talk about the elephant in the room.
Yes. I think that's been photoshopped, is my guess. There isn't perhaps a physical elephant in that room, but it represents a saying that at least is common in our country. It is literally the elephant in the room, and what that means is there's something big that nobody is talking about, nobody is acknowledging. And the way I look at it is training tradition has evolved over the last few decades, that it's no longer just classroom training, and learning has expanded into the business. Also look at leadership, for instance, how that has become not just boss-subordinate, but upward coaching and influencing. Well, evaluation tradition has not moved forward very far other than through our efforts with the New World model. So what we're seeing here is the elephant is representing traditional evaluation, and it is not working. Smile sheets, pre and post tests, and hope for the best is not just not getting the job done. So we're going to be emphasizing some of the things that we taught you in bronze that we think are really germane to helping you move ahead and executing the things that you plan for. So the next slide here shows that there are three elements, three stages of evaluation. First of all, the planning stage, as you know, developing your plans, just like we storyboard our training, we have to plan for evaluation. And then once that plan has been approved and it includes the package that occurs at each level, then it's time to execute, which is primarily what you learned in bronze. and then the demonstration of value is applause for a job well done. We're going to offer you a couple of tips on each of those stages, starting with the planning process. Now, first, it is important to note that here we have a group of people that are planning a major initiative, and I think you all are familiar with doing that, and this was taken in Dubai, and there is Maha, our chief partner in Dubai there with Learn Active. And it is important, first of all, to make sure you are on the same page with the rest of your team before you start planning with your stakeholders. So making sure that they realize it's a package approach, a business partnership approach, no longer just design, develop, and deliver. So let's take a look now, assuming that that's happened, at what happens with stakeholders and how you can build trust with them. And I'm just going to go through a few points here that might be reminders, they might be new ideas. First of all, an obvious one is first to listen and learn. Too often I think we're eager to get our stakeholders on board with us by telling them all the wonderful things we have to offer to them, all the learning solutions and how we can leverage learning objectives and skills gaps. Well, we first better be listening and asking about the business and the needs of the business rather than the power of learning. And so that's the first step. Second of all, it is important to be honest about the limitations of training. Please don't let people believe that you can build a training event that is going to be powerful enough to cross the bridge, to execute application, and then to bring about significant results. It is a part of the package. It's kind of the anchor point, but it's really important that you talk to them about the necessity of the package to be executed properly in order to bring about the expectations that they have for this mission-critical event. Then, in the meantime, we want you to work behind the scenes to become a learning and performance expert. And we use those words, learning and performance, very carefully because, unfortunately, we keep calling ourselves learning providers and learning experts and learning professionals. What we're doing, for those of you who are into the new world, you're selling yourself short. You're not telling the whole story. You are not just learning providers. You are learning and performance providers and engineers and architects. So learn about processes. Learn about initiatives. Learn about policies and software, things beyond just the simple intervention of training. And then it's also important to continue to build this trust with stakeholders. Linda, click please. To work with training participant managers along the journey. And what I mean by that is you need to build your tactical relationships. Once you have established the level of effort and the end in mind with your key stakeholders, your senior stakeholders, you need to build working relationships with the managers along the way and the supervisors by making sure they are involved with the content. They are involved with building the package, the required drivers. They may even help to do some of the training. And especially they are going to be involved with gathering data, doing observations and work review and encouraging and coaching, and ultimately providing evidence at the end when it's time to show your chain of evidence. And then finally, when it comes to working with your stakeholders, provide them with a recommendation package, not just a learning package, but a whole learning and performance package to get their approval on, making sure they understand it so that you then at least have agreement up front that this is the way that we're going to proceed, this is how we're going to collect our data along the way, this is how we will monitor and adjust, and this is how we will all work together to make it happen. Now, the next slide says, don't be too quick. This comes from one of our recent bronze graduates by the name of Karen Case, who has said that she's delighted if we use this example. She is working at the Denver Health Group out of Denver, Colorado. Now, when she went to her stakeholders to find out what they were interested in, they asked for a program, understand that word, program to improve providers' communication skills with patients and their families. Now, that is not a level 4. That is not a business result. Instead, she worked with them, talked with them, and helped them pick up the flag and carry it up the slope to where it became the expected results of the program are higher patient experience, safety and quality scores, increasing Medicaid funding, which will then lead to enhanced financial strength of Denver Health and improved health of the Denver population. This stair-step approach was very clearly outlined all the way to the top of the mountain, where we have enhanced financial strength of the organization leading to a healthier Denver population. She had to work to get this because they did not present that to her right up front. So don't be too quick to just accept what the stakeholders have to say. All right, now we're going to look at some leading indicators. Oh, you know what these are, you remember, but we've kind of organized it a little bit different way towards the end of 2014 here. What we now look at are internal and external leading indicators. These are the signs that what is happening at level 3 through those efforts are starting to bear fruit, are starting to pay off. And notice these are things that happen internally within an organization in terms of quality improving, volume increasing, safety being a more prominent issue, cost, efficiency, all the things you see there, which then brings us to the point where employees are more satisfied and engaged because of these things. Well, pretty soon this starts to spill over to the upper slopes, and now we're looking at external leading indicators. Linda, if we could look at external leading indicators, where we are now looking at customer responses. They are responding to the good work that has been done in the lower slopes, where we're seeing sales volume, new customers, the customers are more satisfied, and then as we get to the upper slopes, we are now seeing the market and the industry being impacted, and this then takes us to the flag at the top of the mountain. Now the next slide I want to show you is what we now call level 4 mountain. Traditional level 4 is the flag at the top of the mountain, and it was too big a journey and too big of a jump to ever get stakeholders to believe that what happens at level 3 is going to all of a sudden jump to flag at the top of the mountain. Now we still need the flag at the top of the mountain because that is where we're going. That's the summit. That is what each of your organizations is in business to do. But let me show you now, when it comes to planning, we want to anticipate what leading indicators will start to pop as people would ultimately start to perform their jobs. First, you'd see the individual outcomes of increased quality and timing and so forth. And then the teams would start to show the progress that's being made. Well, then that would continue to climb up the mountain to the department, divisional. Again, these are all internally. But then as we continue to climb, we start to see a little bit of impact that the customer is starting to notice these improvements, and they are responding in certain ways. And then that continues to lead up to more internal things where the organizational outcomes are being met. And then higher up the slope we go, where we start to see customer satisfaction. Then we start to get even higher, where we are seeing the market. We're seeing the Denver Health Organization maintaining its stability as far as financially, and ultimately we get to that stability turning into an improved Denver Health population in the example that Karen provided to us. So this is what we plan for. We want to anticipate these things, and we want to make sure that we get input from stakeholders, and we ultimately show them this is what we will find, these are the things we're looking for, and we will give you monthly or quarterly reports once this initiative has been launched. And then here is a group recently, look at the left flip chart there. They actually built a little mountain there, and as they worked through what they anticipated would be leading indicators, they put them in order in which they thought they would most likely occur. And this is all about Kirkpatrick, that the power is in the connections in the story rather than just a pile of leading indicators. Wendy, I wonder if we can get a little input from our group now.
Well, I sure hope so, because I think they probably hear the passion in your voice about the importance of leading indicators. So what we'd like to ask all of you is to chime in over in that general chat area and let us know, to what degree are you building leading indicators into your plans today? Are you using them or not? We'll give you a minute to answer that question. Thanks for getting us started, Morgan. All right, just a few of you have chimed in. I'd love to see the 55 others of you online go ahead and voice your thoughts as well. Well, it looks like, Jim, we've just got some people who are making an effort, saying they're trying to, and some people who are still working on it. So hopefully this mountain graphic will be helpful to you out there who, are just thinking, I haven't quite kicked it into gear. And like pretty much everything with the Kirkpatrick model, this is going to work better if you build it into your plan. So please make sure you're making it a discipline to pull out a fresh copy of that Kirkpatrick planning form at the beginning of new initiatives or new programs, and use it to design your plan, not just for what you plan to evaluate, but really for what you plan to execute. And make that part of your discipline and institutionalize it, and then you'll have these things built into your plan and you'll know what you're looking for. So once you have that good plan, then what we can talk about is, all right, then how do you execute that plan? So now Jim's going to give you some tips to help you during execution, and these things will be much simpler if you started with a good plan.
Wendy, I'm really glad you emphasized that. This is the most powerful new addition to the New World Model, these leading indicators, and we often caution people that more is not better when it comes to behaviors, when it comes to learning objectives and so forth. But with leading indicators, more is better, because you have to plan for these connections and you have to execute in such a way that you actually see these things happening. Now you'll see the next slide looks very familiar to you. There we have the same mountain. That is Mount Rainier, by the way, in Washington on a clear day. And now we're talking about execution. This now becomes the level 3 and level 4 mountain, because if you'll notice, the lower left of the slide there is some nice green grass and little hills. That's where the training has occurred. That's where the skills come. That's where we make sure people are prepared for their climb. And the climb is the application of what they learned. As they start to climb, notice the going gets kind of tough there. Oh, we hit a little landslide there, or there's a hole in the ground we have to go around, or a crevasse. And then we may need to put up a ladder to get over a ridge, or some ropes to pull ourselves up. We may have to alter our course. But as we do that and we continue the climb, this is about monitoring and adjusting along the way. And you are making sure you have your high beams, your most powerful radar, to pick up not only to what degree are people applying what they learned, and if so, we want to find out why so we can encourage others on the climb. We also want to find out if they're not doing it. And if so, we want to fix those barriers, put down those ladders, and continue the climb. So as Linda clicks us up the rest of the way, this represents the execution part of a major initiative, where not only are you monitoring the level 3 behaviors and the drivers of those behaviors, but you are seeing the leading indicators popping and the flags flapping. Now, let me tell you, there are 2 sources of these flags, and we want them as close together as possible. The first source is where you have planned for them. You are looking for specific leading indicators, both internal and external. You have your fingers on the pulse. You are monitoring those. You are capturing those. But you are also interviewing, and you are conducting surveys along the climb to find out how are the climbers doing, and how are the climber supervisors doing. And they will provide you with additional leading indicators that you did not even anticipate. If you remember back to Medallion, one of the leading indicators that one of the franchise owners of Toyota said is, I could tell this initiative was working when the sales manager and the finance manager went to lunch together for the first time in 20 years. The room erupted. Now that wasn't anything that somebody was looking for. We didn't have radar out for that, but we discovered it through good level 3, level 4 hybrid evaluation along the way. Now, the next picture shows this same group of people, and what this represents is they are showing stakeholders and everybody who is a shareholder in this initiative the progress that is being made. You know, it's going to be very similar to the planning, but at this point, keep in mind the orange box, the power in the New World model, monitor and adjust. And what they're doing is they have monitored, they are presenting what's going well, they're presenting the weak points, barriers, and they are problem solving to make sure they are clearing those barriers and really accentuating the good that is happening. So that is just critical that you keep your stakeholders involved, and in this way there will be no surprises at the end because you are monitoring along the way, you are apprising your stakeholders rather than waiting a year to tell them either the flag at the top is flying or it isn't. All right, let's now get a little participant input into this.
Well, I have a feeling I, to some degree, know the answer to this question based on the first question. So for those of you who are identifying leading indicators, to what degree are you monitoring and reporting on them in your plans so that you know how things are going, your stakeholders know how things are going, and so do your training graduates? Give me some thoughts over in that general chat area. All right, well, Donna said that they don't have anything to monitor yet. That's fair enough, Donna. What I would consider doing is take a look at your plan and see if you have enough leading indicators. Some leading indicators should be fairly quick wins that you see right away. So if you don't have anything that you're seeing reasonably quickly after people have started to implement what they learned on the job, I would look for some of those.
And if you're having trouble coming up with them, take a look at those 2 slides where we provided you dozens of suggestions that might work for you.
All right, it looks like some of you say that you reach out to your stakeholders. Yeah, I think, like I said, the trend that I'm seeing here is people saying, well, I don't, quote, have them yet. Definitely make sure you've got some quick wins in there and things that you're going to start to see pretty quickly. Those things are going to help you to know if you've actually even started down the road. You know, you'd hate to wait 90 days and find out that actually nothing had happened. So you want to be looking for some things that are going to be pretty quick after training has finished up or people start that implementation phase. And that's frankly usually when people need the most encouragement and a little bit of support. So reaching out at that point in time, I think you're going to get more value from them waiting for the big measurement after 90 days or 120 days.
You know, Wendy, I'm really glad you mentioned that concept of 90 days. That is traditional level 3 evaluation, the survey to the training grads and their supervisors at 90 days. What happens in the 89 days before that is much more critical. The 90 is merely a formal check. And Wendy, you mentioned passion in my voice. Part of the passion, to be honest with everybody, is frustration because there are leading indicators all over the place, and they are probably easy to find. In fact, they probably fall in your lap at times. What you're not doing for some degree is capturing them and being able to see how they align with your initiative and take advantage of them. So obviously what we chose to do during execution is not dealing with the level 3 itself, the required drivers, because as I review your evaluation plans, you are strong with level 3. You've got good critical behaviors, you've got a good driver package. Now, of course, the key is executing that driver package, but the weaknesses are always at level 4. Flag at the top of the mountain and a rather meager attempt at leading indicators. The leading indicators, once things get initiated, are your eyes and your ears to what's going on. I guess I've said enough, huh, Wendy, on that?
Well, you know, Jim, I wanted to tag on to something you said where you said often these fall in your lap, and I think that's really true, and it is a matter of just actually identifying them and capturing them as a leading indicator. A great example was that medallion example of the two managers going to lunch together. What you might be looking for here is the things that people say to you in passing in the hall, or when you get a quick phone call from a former training graduate, or you might just happen to talk to them about some other topic and something comes up. It might be things like, yeah, well, since training, our absentee rate has really gone down. Or, yeah, you know, since training, what we really find is compliance is better on our reports. So I think that that orientation and that job aid really helped. It could be as simple as that, and it might just be a matter of asking that person, hey, do you mind if I just sort of quote you on that? Or could you come to a meeting with me and just share that feedback? And it doesn't have to be some big formal thing. So leading indicators are often everywhere.
That is great. And, you know, Wendy, if someone says that to me, I've seen compliance improve, boy, I would get my pen and paper out in a hurry and say, can you tell me more about that? Get as many details, historical comparisons, what's different now than what was before. And you know what? Another myth about evaluation is that it has to be measurable. It has to be metrics. Now, we want as many metrics as possible to put into our evidence, but sometimes the word of people and the stories that they present can be just as powerful to winning the hearts of your stakeholders rather than just their minds.
All right, Jim, so we've been through some tips during planning and execution. I bet what comes next is demonstration of value.
That's right. And now on our next slide here, we see there's the stakeholders coming up. There they are. You all have them. You all have a jury that is either actively or passively waiting to hear what has happened as a result of this initiative that they have been informed and involved with. So always be mindful of the jury, be preparing your evidence for the jury and preparing your story of value for them. Don't be treating them like they're training people or learning people, because they're not. And rather than me telling these stories, remember the title of this is The Inner Fire to the Bright Lights. I'm going to now introduce you to the first of two bright lights. Danny Rubin. Is that you, Danny? Hello, Danny. Need to unmute? Now, I do know that is Danny Rubin. He is working Linda's working with him to get unmuted because we want you to hear the story from him. Danny, that you?
Absolutely. I'm trying to get him unmuted because we did do a sound check and he was perfectly clear this morning. I'm not... He must have accidentally gotten logged out. He is not on the list.
I see him down at the bottom under Rubin, Daniel.
Oh.
So go ahead and click on his phone there, and then Danny, you may have to re-enter an audio code.
Hi, is that better?
There you are.
Ah.
That's what I get for looking for Danny there. Sorry, Daniel.
Yeah.
Oh, Danny,
No
glad to
problem.
have you. And just so everybody knows, that is an accurate picture of Danny Rubin. Danny, if I'm not mistaken, the rest of what you're going to share with us are kind of not exactly the real names and faces of things. Is that true?
Correct. Mine is the only name that's real. And again, Jim, Wendy, Linda, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I'm on the LinkedIn group if anybody would like to contact me with further questions, further information about the study. But as Jim, I guess I should go ahead and start.
Go ahead. Give us a little background into what this is all about.
So, basically, I've always loved evaluation, and I gave I asked my supervisor to attend Kirkpatrick training, and the opportunity came up where in Silver there was, we all have to design a project, and one of the major issues that was confronting our company was that there were many traffic backing accidents. We have many employees who drive, and there were many backing accidents. And In the middle of the year, a supervisor came over to us and asked for training. So this is one of those typical, what we call here, pizza shop requests. I have a problem, I need training, as if that's going to solve it. But thanks to the situation, and because I was in silver, my supervisor realized that we can start to break in the Kirkpatrick model on all levels. He paid for it, so to speak, with both I took my time and the company paid for the silver certification. So that was the opportunity for me to jump in and start employing all the tenets of the Kirkpatrick model. So as you see in the response items, we did not only a training, but we moved it up to every level. And here I'm going to throw in a plug because there are many things that get in the way of any activity, particularly when you want to introduce something new. The fact that the Silver program has a regular call, that sort of got me out of the weeds. That re-energized me, speaking with peers, speaking about letting Jim know where exactly I was, and just the energy of that call really helped to spur things forward. So we got everything together in that response level. And on the next slide, I'll show you the results. Number one, the customer was satisfied. No backing accidents. Parenthetically, to make sure that they realized what a significant accomplishment that was, we have a safety dinner. So I invited his entire crew to that dinner, and they were feasting on prime rib because of this accomplishment. And this gave me a much louder voice. The program in general gave me a louder voice when analyzing why we had this success. And as you see on the bullet, the first two reasons may seem familiar to you, but please take a look at the third bullet. If I was just introducing training, there was no way we would have called attention to the actual equipment. There's no way the program would have been successful, because if equipment doesn't matter, right, I could talk to you about some deflated footballs that may matter to a lot of people out there. So this is one of the key highlights that made my constituents realize that I'm not doing just training. It's about performance. And if we could go to the next slide. That gave me a lot of leverage, and what I did was I started a focus group. And parenthetically, I worked within the customer's program where I did this at one of their regular staff meetings. So I just took 15 minutes of time they would be sitting anyway. I took all those factors from the supervisors and say, why do you think you had no backing accidents? And generally these categories should look familiar to you. However, there are a couple that might be unique. That last one, you see new trainee restriction. That is where basically because of this program there was a rule in place that people who were new to the job were not allowed to drive. They had their commercial driver's licenses, but they just got on board. They were not allowed to drive for at least a year. Now, as you see in the graph, it is debatable whether the trainee's opinion and the supervisor's opinion did not exactly coincide, but this gave me an incredible format for discussing that. So all of a sudden we went from a trainer to performance to positive interaction between supervisors and their charges. So next slide, please.
What I like about that is you are showing them that there was a package approach and that they were involved with a supervisor emphasis and communications from the company and the evaluation. You were showing them that probably no one of these factors, or even two, were going to give you the same results, but this is the package approach, and what you were doing is you were creating discussion and educating them that this is the only way that we are going to get the results that you guys are requiring of us. So really nice job with the package.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly, okay, and I would add to that, because if after showing the results, if you look at this slide and say, well, what did it? You can look at the trainees and you can look at the supervisors, and everything is so close, and it meant so many different things to so many different people. The key finding is we need all of the above. All right, if I could go to the next slide. a couple of the comments. Here was another area where I really put in that I'm a performance consultant, not a trainer. People were, my customers thought that I would have a stake in more training, but instead I asked them, when should this training happen? How should it go? And Linda, if you could throw in the next slide. They pushed back on level 3. They pushed back on a couple of items, and therefore I said that is great feedback. Now, I didn't say that, well, the training is really better and you should have more of it and tried to defend it. I just kept focusing on how it related to the performance. And the same thing is true of the next slide with the survey comments. If I could ask you to turn to that. And you see right away, every 2 years is good enough. And that second quote, well, ultimately, it's all about performance. I wasn't saying it. I was just facilitating that, and it really took off. So that led us to conclusions on the next slide. Linda, if I could ask to move to the, thank you. Corporate training has to make sure everything is there. It's what Jim's been saying all along, and thanks to the Silver program, it really gave me the platform to emphasize that. And when I was presenting this, I was presenting it to my boss's boss, a director, and in the middle of this slide, I said, if we don't take this approach, we are going to be no different than the coffee budget. Just like when it comes to coffee, it's, how do we cut it? It's an expense. It has to be there, but can we make a little less of it? And he bought into it, and basically I've gotten some traction that I never would have had before.
And Danny, I really appreciate the story here. And just so you guys know behind the scenes, Danny, it wasn't all smooth sailing for Danny with this. He ran into resistance. There were people that said, I'm thinking one particular that said, go back to where you belong. But you know what? If you can withstand some of that initial rattling, the potential benefit and the people that are open-minded and mission-minded will really see the value in this approach. And I know what's happening with Danny. They are asking him for more of the same. So, Danny, we sure appreciate that. We're going to look at another bright light now. And there she is right in the middle. That is Annie Hester. And Annie, are you with us?
Hey, Jim, I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, good. Annie works Fort Benning, Georgia with the U.S. Army. You're not in Georgia right now. You're in California, right?
Yes, I am.
Well, we're glad you got up early to join us. Really appreciate it. So why don't you tell your story of the execution and how you demonstrated what you did to your commanders.
All righty. Linda, you can go to the next slide for me, please. Okay, what I want to mention here is, before we start, is the actual purpose of the course. And the purpose of the course was to prepare soldiers while they're in Afghanistan to integrate the training that we've given them, then so that they can advise their commanders on how to assess threats and how to plan tactical usage of the handheld devices that we were training to use to defeat counter IEDs, which are improvised explosive devices relating to dismounted patrols. So we were not training them to go out and find IEDs. We were training them to avoid IEDs when possible while they were conducting missions. So basically, Linda, you can do a clip for me. So if you look at the FOB, at the FOB, the top right corner, and their objectives to get to the bottom FOB, bottom black circle square there, and the objective. One more click, Linda. So what they would have to do is choose the most tactically sound route based on the analysis from previous incidences of where IEDs had exploded or areas they were prone to do it. One more click, Linda. So among the things that we trained to do was to select a tactically sound route. So what route would, obviously this is the route that they would choose, and our graduates would know how to choose that route. And Linda, next slide, please. And one more clip. So here we chose, obviously, the Kirkpatrick framework, and this is the mechanism that we showed our stakeholder, our bosses, that
we looked at each level, and we looked at what we were trying to get out from each level and how we were going to measure that. And although our objective was the results at level 4, we felt that it was important for us to evaluate each level of the model simply so that we can answer the question why if we were not getting the results that we were looking for. So overall, level 1 and 2 data were collected during the course, and levels 3 and 4 were collected during and after the units or the soldiers' deployment to Afghanistan. Next slide, please, Linda. So after we formalized our plan, we had to set the groundwork for our evaluation efforts. Basically, our trainers, prior to training these units, they actually met with the highest level of the leadership in the organization, which is your brigade commander. And during that time, we took the opportunity to set the groundwork where we told the boss's boss, there's nobody else above this guy, that, hey, sir, this is what our entire evaluation plan is. We will be in touch with your soldiers for the next 18 months from the time they leave their class, our training classes, to the time you guys get back home. We will be sending emails out, and we'll have an observation team there that we're piggybacking of. And when you guys return, we'll sit down with your soldiers and talk to you. And prior to even their soldiers coming to our training, we're already talking to them and their actual unit commanders. So that laid the groundwork for us and letting them know. And then obviously, once you have that type of leadership backing you, you basically get what you need. And for the most part, and there are certain situations where we couldn't anticipate as far as receiving feedback from our surveys. Next slide, please, Linda. So what we did for level 1, the soldiers completed a survey for the end of course survey, and what we wanted was these 9 aspects of the courses to have a rating of 4 or higher, and we did. We met our standard of 4 or higher. On average, it was well over 4%. We took the survey results and we actually changed the course content. We added some lessons and deleted some lessons based on the actual soldiers' feedback, and we actually read every single one of those feedback before we did those changes. Linda, next slide, please. So for level 2, each student completed a pre-test prior to receiving instruction and a post-test on the very last day. And we wanted an increase of 25% or higher. There were 2 units that did not receive those 25% from the end of, and from the end of course survey, we found out why they were, what the reasons were. It wasn't necessarily because the soldiers didn't pass our test, but it was just when they were receiving the training within their deployment cycle. One of the recommendations that we made was to change, they were receiving the training 30 days before deploying. Our recommendation was at least 90 days out before their deployment, which that change was implemented. Next slide, please, Linda. Okay, level 3 was actually the most difficult for us to measure, not just level 4. Level 2 was more difficult than anything, simply because we wanted to see their behavioral changes, and it's hard to do level 3 when your trainees are in Afghanistan. But we got really lucky in that we had a team from another organization that were actually embedded with some of our units, and we just piggyback off of what they were doing, asked them to observe actual performance behavior changes that we wanted to see of our graduates. In addition to that, we did send follow-on surveys, and we conducted our focus group once they returned, and then another team within our organization conducted random surveys of at least 300 soldiers within that brigade, and we were able to get feedback from different perspectives from fellow soldiers, different units, and also their different chain of command as well.
And then the final result, level 4.
Yes. You believe it or not, this was not as hard as we thought it would be. We had all this data already, and the only challenge that we had was to mine that data so we can eliminate the noise from what we were actually trying to get at, our specific measure. So what the 3 variables that we looked at were a number of IEDs that were found and cleared that didn't detonate, and IEDs that did detonate, and then the number of casualties that were produced from those IED detonations. From the course, we expected to see all three ratios for the trained units to be lower than those of untrained units because soldiers are trained to avoid areas with IEDs. So inadvertently, that would reduce the number of IEDs that were producing casualties. So as we expected, the founding, cleared, and detonation ratios for all of our trained units were lower than those of the untrained units. And then the casualties for 3 of the 4 units we looked at were lower for the trained unit. And if you'll look at comparison 1, the trained unit actually had a higher casualty number than the untrained unit. And I can't go into great detail, but one thing I want to piggyback on what Jim said earlier, it's just not purely looking at the numbers, but when you actually listen to what the soldiers did and talked to them, we found the anomaly and figured out why this unit, their numbers look like that. And so for us, that wasn't a failure per se as far as evaluation go. We actually understood what caused that spike to go up based on just talking to them. Jim, one thing.
The next slide, Linda, we just want to kind of wrap up here with the most important point here, Annie, of just these 2 points of what has happened as a result of this one flagship Pathfinder program that you presented to the community.
Well, one of the things that we actually did within our own organization is take in evaluation results and make an informed decision based on them, and not just somebody had a great idea and ran with it, but we actually took evaluation results, changed the way we conducted training, changed the way our course content and our leadership deciding, hey, let's continue this course into the next fiscal year. And one of the other things we're trying to do with the evaluation effort is to expand this to other center of excellence for the military, or the Army specifically, and to create a community of practice where folks within the training industry for the government, not government, but the Army, it can and expand on the use of evaluation to make their decisions and how they develop training.
And Annie, the final lesson for me on this is we hear lots of people say, we're consultants, we don't have access to our training graduates after they leave us, or people who are large companies, global companies, we can't really access them in the field or even in the military. How do we possibly get them once they've been deployed? Well, you can debunk all of that, because if you can figure out how to conduct focus groups and interviews and surveys and questionnaires to people in the deserts and mountains of Afghanistan, none of the rest have an excuse for being able to say level 3 and level 4 is just too hard. So really appreciate what you guys have done here. And now we're going to take a look at some questions that came in through the Survey Monkey that we sent out to you. So the first one is, what specific level 3 evaluation methods do you recommend for leadership initiatives? Wendy, why don't we see if we can get some ideas from the group on that?
Yeah, obviously Jim and I have some, but we'd like all of you to chime in over in general chat. Leadership initiatives are such a hot topic right now. How do you make sure that people are really leading their teams and doing all the good things they were supposed to do in your plans? What kinds of methods do you use to reinforce, monitor, encourage, and reward those leadership behaviors? All right, Heather has gotten us started. Follow-up interviews and check-ins, and Regina said focus groups. Corey says peer-to-peer evaluations, debriefs. Some good ideas, and I know there are some more out there. There are 57 of you out there. I know that you guys know how to do this. Okay, Audrey has said that she likes to show the relationship to the strategic initiative. I'd love to hear a little more about how you do that, Audrey, if you don't mind typing a bit.
Ooh, the power is in the connections. I would too.
All right. Some of you do surveys, observation. So there are obviously quite a few different things that you can do. Now, for a leadership initiative, a lot of you are getting at the idea here that you might be looking at the leaders themselves and looking at their behaviors and what they're doing. But a lot of you are also getting at the fact that leadership should have a positive impact on the direct reports, relationships with clients, and other things. So when you're talking about organizational climate surveys, employee surveys, and peer-to-peer reviews, you can get at those kinds of things as well. So good ideas there. Some of them more traditional, some of them less. This is another area where that anecdotal stuff can really be helpful to you.
You know, one other thing that I learned from Danny and Annie, that I don't believe Annie was in Afghanistan observing what was going on, and Danny was out in the field looking at trucks backing up. But you need to at least be the architect of this driver package you're talking about here and the coordinator of it, at least making sure that those who are supposed to be observing and coaching and mentoring and recognizing are doing that.
Absolutely. We have another question that came into us in the pre-conference call survey, and that is, how specifically should we define business goals for our major training programs? And if the person who asked this question wouldn't mind giving me a little more information over in general chat, that would help. But I'll give some ideas here. I guess I don't know that I would be defining the business goal. What I would be doing is I would be getting in touch with my stakeholders and finding out what their business goals are in their own words and in their own worlds, and then talk to them about how a training program or initiative could support them in accomplishing those goals and meeting their own metrics that are important to the business unit. So I don't know that I'd be defining the goal as much as determining what it is and my role in supporting it, and then really talking about that partnership package, that level 3 and 4 package that Jim talks about so much in terms of what are the roles and responsibilities that each party will have. How are the participants of training going to be held accountable for what they need to do after training? What is the role of their supervisor? What is your role as the training professional or maybe the coach? What are the stakeholders going to do to hopefully send the right message right from the top that this is important? Those are the kinds of things that I would be working on for a major training program.
You know what else, Wendy? I know you talk a lot about kind of sub-goals, and those can be department goals, division goals, and those are the leading indicators, and they may be the same as the flag at the top of the mountain, but they may be a little bit different. And again, that could be more of a business goal from a little lower level, a little lower perspective.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Yeah, thanks. So there's another question that came in that Jim is going to answer, and that's, I'm having difficulty figuring out how to evaluate a program with a suite of training sessions. So it sounds like it might be a pretty big program, lots of people, maybe around the world, around the country. Jim, what advice do you have?
Well, one is, don't follow tradition that says you have a training class and then you go and do a level 3, level 1, 2, 3, and 4 for that particular class. Now, there are times when we do that, but in this case, if there are a variety of courses and a variety of different programs that constitute leadership, for instance, leadership training, you're not so concerned about the specific courses once you get to the level 3, level 4 mountain. You're really looking at the behaviors that are skills implemented from a variety, from the suite of those different training sessions. And at that point, you are looking at the behaviors, the drivers of the behaviors, and the leading indicators. But when it comes time for attribution, when you're trying to find out, as Danny said, trying to find the reasons, as Annie said, trying to find the reasons for the success, then you can trace back and ask your participants and supervisors to trace back which of those programs or elements of those programs contributed the most to me applying what I learned. And that way, you can start to trim the scrap training, the training that's not hitting the mark, and start to just focus on the targeted components of that suite that's really, really leading to performance and impact. There's where you get your funding, by cutting the garbage and redeploying it to level 3, level 4 stuff. Maybe I shouldn't have said garbage, but I did.
Oh, Jim, I just wish you were more honest and real sometimes, right?
I'll try.
All right. Well, if you're thinking, wow, I wish I were Danny or Annie or someone who has accomplished what they've accomplished, maybe what you're looking for to support you is Kirkpatrick Silver Level Certification. If you have completed bronze or you're working through bronze, we really encourage you to consider this program. People, I think, have a hard time understanding exactly what the program does, so we'll take a minute to explain that. The program provides support during execution. So when you're having those questions like, well, how do I actually get out there and make sure people are doing what they're supposed to do? What if people aren't doing what they're supposed to do? How do I adjust my plan and keep this on track? How do I stay in touch with stakeholders? Those are all kinds of issues that are discussed during the Silver Level program, and you have access not just to us, but a cohort of other people who are probably experiencing very similar situations. The program provides templates for interim and final reports. You know, we get this question all the time. People email us and say, will you just, send me the format for a good final report? Well, there is a good format for a final report, but like so many things, it is something that you want to customize to meet your needs, and that's what we give you in the Silver Level. The next program is really coming up pretty soon, and it is your only opportunity to get Silver Level in the first half of the year. It's online starting on March 3rd, and you can save $300 until February 2nd. The price of the program is exactly the same as bronze, $17.95 regular, which makes that early bird price $14.95. We'll also have an in-person program near Washington, D.C., November 19th and 20th. And for the United States, this is what we have scheduled. So if you are thinking about implementing a big program or in the midst of implementing a big program, these are your opportunities in the U.S. There will probably be a couple more internationally as the year goes on. Now, I know some of you out there are already working on silver or have finished it up, and for you, we have gold level certification. Also, I think a bit misunderstood. And at gold level, this is free of charge, and all we want you to do is what Danny and Annie did. We want you to share your experience, your best practice. For goodness sake, you can even share your failures. That's just as helpful for people. Your steps along the way in implementing your plan, and then the results that you could actually produce. You can do that like Danny and Annie did by participating in a webinar. You can participate in a public conference. You can contribute to a book, article, white paper, or blog posting. And if you don't feel like you have an avenue to do this, reach out to us and we'll help you. The only criteria is that you've completed your Silver Level and that these results are shared outside of your own organization. And in recognition of this, you'll receive a plaque, a virtual badge, and if you'd like to be recognized on our website, we are happy to do that for you on the gold level page. So Jim, I'm going to turn it back to you for that call to action and inspirational statement that you're always so good at making.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to scare people a little bit here because the call to action that has come to my mind is a word of caution. First to Danny and Annie, and everyone else can listen in. You guys have been bold, you have been mission-minded, you have not been ego-driven and personal agenda-driven, but I'm cautioning you that you are now opening doors that you may be surprised at. There are going to be people, there have already been people for you too that have noticed and said, we want more. And my challenge, my caution to the rest of you is be careful what you wish for, because if indeed you take this similar route and you successfully execute, in this case, even one of your major mission critical programs, and you present it in a compelling manner to your stakeholders, there will be somebody, a bright light out there that says, I want more of these. And how many times, Wendy, we have seen our silver graduates receive unbelievable opportunities because they have separated themselves from the tradition of smile sheets pre and post test and hope for the best. So those of you who are working on silver, if you're up against any barriers, reach out to us and we will help you overcome those, because truly silver and gold is what drives our mission. And again, thank you all for joining us.
Thanks. Bye-bye.